Hey guys. Okay, so last and final section that goes along with Unit 13 is talking about segregation. All right, so it's kind of been a little while since we've talked about African Americans specifically. I know we've talked about the struggles with Native Americans, but what's going on with African Americans? Why are they um, experiencing a lot of issues after the Civil War? Okay, all right, so here's how things are going. So after the Civil War is over and we have Reconstruction, unfortunately, as soon as the Compromise of 1877 happens and the troops are taken out of the South, we see a lot of the same things happen. Almost a similar form of slavery, with African Americans being put in as tenant farmers and sharecroppers, and still kind of under the thumb of a lot of the big plantation owners, which is why a lot will choose to go out west and start a brand new life. We talked about that during the Wild West unit just a little bit. But what else is happening? So we still have a lot of issues with discrimination, okay? At the end of Reconstruction, we see that a lot of things are going to be put in place to stop African American males. Women can't vote yet. African American males from being able to vote, because the 15th Amendment says all men can now vote. So things that are going to be put in place, like literacy test. You have to be able to read and write. And we know that during slavery, that African Americans it was illegal for them to learn how to read and write. That was just part of the thing, part of many things that they were not allowed to learn to do. So most of them can't read and write, so they wouldn't be able to pass a literacy test. Poll taxes. If you think about the time that we have general elections usually take place November, right? And that's before a lot of major holidays. Well, are you going to save up to go vote, or are you going to save your money to spend it on your family for the holidays? So a lot of people are not going to have extra money to go and pay to vote. And if literacy test didn't kick you out of being able to vote, and you have money that you don't mind spending on going to vote, what might get you is the grandfather clause. And the grandfather clause simply says that if your grandfather was a slave, you can't vote. So all those things are stopping African Americans from being able to use all of their newly acquired rights, like voting. And again, that's just men for right now. Women don't get the right to vote until the 19th Amendment in 1920. Speaking of, keep in mind that this is the centenary, the 100-year anniversary that women have been able to vote. So ladies, if you are hitting 18 before November, you need to make sure that you register and make Susan B. Anthony and all those other lady suffragists proud. Okay. So we know all these things are being put in place to stop African Americans from being able to fully use all their new rights. Black codes are still sprinkled across everywhere, north and south. It's not really just a south thing. Jim Crow laws being put in place and seen throughout the South as well. And it's just pretty much state and local laws that are restricting what is seen as being socially acceptable for African Americans. And the new concept, the new word is segregation, separating the races. So now what we're going to see, since there is no more slavery, is we're going to see a big push to have this separation of the races in all public places. So what's going to happen is there's a major court case, and you need to know it. Star it, highlight, circle it in your note packet. Make sure that you know it, but it's Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, sets the stage for a little over 50 years of segregation, to where sometimes when you go to a bathroom or a water fountain or a place in a restaurant, it might say white only, and black only. But 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to say colored only and white only. Just because if we say colored, then you can group in pretty much all other races: African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans. And so 9 times out of 10, you would see that wording put on public restrooms, water fountains, separate seating in restaurants, movie theaters, any public place. You're going to see that seating. So now we are making it legal to separate the races, and we're going to have it like that for, like I said, over 50 years before it gets overturned by Brown versus Board of Education. Racial etiquette, and anytime you talk about etiquette in general, etiquette is talking about proper behavior. Or racial etiquette, or proper etiquette with various races, is kind of established that anybody that is not white or thought to be white, because a lot of times we'll judge a book by its cover, based by what we see a person look like and what we think they are race-wise. But how should we treat and separate those different race groups? So kind of the whole racial etiquette during this turn of the century time period is that anybody that's not considered white is considered more of a second class person, shouldn't have same or equal value and rights and opportunities. Unfortunately, that was the common thought. And that anybody that was not white should be, kind of kept in their place. Well, that was the thinking during the turn of the century. Unfortunately, lynching happened a lot. Public lynchings were something that happened not just in the South, even though that was primarily where you heard about most of them, but North and South. And a lynching is just a public hanging without any kind of trial. There was no judge, no jury, no court case, no evidence. There was just somebody somewhere had an excuse or a reason as to why this person deserved that punishment. It is illegal today. Lynching is a federal crime punishable by death, depending on what state you're in. Not all states have the death penalty. But discrimination was everywhere. You can't say that it was just in the South, because it was in the North and the South. Now, there's a couple of guys that you need to make sure that you know. Hint, hint, some of which might be on your unit test and midterm. Booker T. Washington is one of those guys. Booker T. Washington is an African American. He is from the South. He is going to build and found the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama in 1881. He is going to encourage African Americans to fight for equal rights economically. He says, get a good education, go get you a good paying job, and let's fight for equality in the workplace first before we fight for social and political equality. So he had a different point of view compared to who we'll talk about here in just a second. But he said, fight for economic equality first. Prove that we are just as smart, just as capable of doing a good job, deserve the same pay as everybody else. Now, on the other side of that, W.E.B. Du Bois, who is Harvard educated, PhD, he says, that's crazy. We should be able to fight and get all equal rights now across the board, socially, economically, politically. We should not have to wait. It's not something that we should have to ask for. It should just be given. We are a human being just like everybody else. We deserve the same equal rights across the board. Again, shouldn't wait. Shouldn't have to do this in stages. He's also going to be one of the founders of the NAACP that starts up in 1909. And if you don't know what that stands for, it's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And they want to get rid of segregation, get rid of discrimination. They're fighting against racism. They're trying to gain all equal civil rights for African Americans, men and women. But and there's a picture in here of a public lynching, and that was a picture that was actually years ago taken out of textbooks because people believed that it was too graphic of an image for young people. But I think if you can watch news and movies and some of the video games that you guys play, the Halo and all those other ones, that I think you're okay to see this image. But unfortunately, it is not just African Americans that are facing this discrimination. You know it's happening with Native Americans and African Americans, but also think about Hispanic Americans who are coming in from Mexico. Their children are facing discrimination and being told to go to these segregated schools. And it might be separate. Plessy versus Ferguson says that the races can be separate, but it must be equal. And what they mean by that is, let's take school for example. So if there's an all-white school and an all-colored school, they should be equal. They should have the same amount of school buses and funding and textbooks and opportunities, but that is not the case. The colored schools were like a one-room schoolhouse with like one textbook that 50 students have to share with a broken down school bus, and the white school had textbooks for every student, a desk and new materials, and 50 school buses and brand new everything. So all that, yes, is separate, but nothing is equal. And so that's what we're going to realize. This plan is flawed. It's flawed to begin with because you should not be able to separate anybody based on anything: race, gender, ethnicity, religion. It doesn't matter. But unfortunately, that is a fight that is going to be had, and it's going to last for over 50 years. All right, more on that later, guys, but bye for now.